Hi students. So today I'm going to show you how to quickly graph a linear function in equation form from different forms of a linear function by using the intercepts. It's a very easy way and I'll show you. One of the intercepts is our y-intercept, which we are already familiar with. We use the letter b to represent it in our mx plus b form of a linear equation, linear function. The y-intercept, remember, is where the graph crosses or intersects the y-axis. That's the vertical axis. And at that point, so it's a point, x has a value of 0. So as an ordered pair, it would be 0, comma, the y-intercept. Okay? The x-intercept is just the opposite of the y-intercept. It's where the graph crosses or intersects the x-axis, and it is a point where the y value equals 0. So it would look like some x value, comma 0. Okay? The x-intercepts are also known as the zeros of a graph, and I need you to know that word because sometimes it'll refer to the x-intercepts by using the word 0, but it won't say x-intercepts, and I need you to know what we're talking about. So as we're taking these notes and as you're working on this assignment, it might be a good idea to have some graph paper handy, especially if you're not able to print out the notes or the practice. So go ahead, if you don't, just go ahead and sketch this little graph on your paper. The graph goes through the y-axis right here at positive 2. That is known as the y-intercept. And the graph crosses the x-axis right here at negative 3. That is the x-intercept. So for this particular graph, the y-intercept has the coordinates 0, comma 2, and the x-intercept has the coordinates negative 3, comma 0. Notice on both of these where the zeros are. So the cool thing about graphing a line by using the x and y intercepts is you can very, very easily see the slope. If I make a triangle using my x and y axes, right? Because the x and y intercepts both follow the axis. There's my rise and run. My run is 2 units. Sorry, my rise is 2 units. My run is 3 units. So the slope for this particular graph is rise of 2 over run of 3. Because it's going up from left to right, I want to keep that positive. So it's very easy to find your slope when you can graph a line using its x and y intercepts. Let's go ahead and practice. Okay, in our examples, we are going to find both the x and y intercepts, then we're going to sketch a graph, and then we're going to find the slope. So here's our first equation. Notice this is not in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. If it was, I could very easily begin with my b, which would be to graph my y-intercept, and then move with my m using the rise and the run like we did before. This equation is in standard form. I want you to kind of be able to recognize when you see this form. It looks like this. The x and y's are both on the left side of the equation. In this form, I cannot see the slope or the y-intercept, so I can't graph immediately like I can when it's in slope-intercept form. So what I could do, like we did before, is we could solve for y in those 2 steps that we did, and then we would be able to see the slope and y-intercept. Or we could find the x and y-intercepts and just graph those. So we're going to start there. So this is how Miss D does it. I'm going to divide my paper into 2 sides, kind of like a left and a right. On one side, we're going to find the x-intercept. Remember, this is where y equals 0. On the other side, we're going to find the y-intercept. Remember, this is where x equals 0. So just to remind you. And this is how I always do it so I get in these good habits. Okay? So y equals 0 and x equals 0. And you're going to use that to do this. So we're going to rewrite our equation, but for the x-intercept where y is 0, I'm going to replace the y with 0 because that's what it equals. So it's going to look like this. 2x minus 3 times 0 equals 12. Now what happens whenever you replace y with 0, this whole term goes away. So sometimes I will just put my finger over it or kind of even like erase that whole part of the equation and then check it out. I've got this cute little equation, 2x equals 12. Let me put that back though. So when I multiply that negative 3 by 0, it makes 0 and it's really gone. So that whole y term disappears. Now I've got 2x equals 12. And if I want to rewrite that so it's a little bit easier to see, that's fine. Easy equation to solve. You're going to divide both sides by 2, and then x equals 6. 6 is that x-intercept. So the way you write it, remember the x-intercept is where y is 0. You just put the 6 in the x part. Just put it right here. So this is my x-intercept. All right, we're going to do the same thing for the y-intercept, but this time, remember y-intercept is where x equals 0, so this time we're going to replace the x part of my equation with 0. So it's going to look like this. 2 times 0 minus 3y equals 12. And what happens whenever you multiply 2 by 0, that whole x term just disappears. Okay? When I'm doing this on my own paper, I kind of just put my finger over the x term and then I see what equation is left that I need to solve. So if you want to rewrite it as negative 3y equals 12, you can. Don't forget that minus sign. And then you solve this equation. To solve this equation for y, you're going to divide both sides by negative 3. So y equals 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. There is the y value of your y-intercept. So to write it as a point, remember, as a point, the y-intercept has an x value of 0. So we're going to put that y value of negative 4 there. And there is my y-intercept. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sketch a graph of this. So to sketch a graph, you don't need graph paper. If you've got it, cool. We're just going to go ahead and just draw it on our paper. So let's see. Since I have graph paper, I might as well just use it. So here are my x and y axes. Make sure you know the difference between your axes. Hopefully you do by now. X is side to side, y is up and down. And we're going to go ahead and graph these 2 points. So the x-intercept was 6, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. That's right here. And my y-intercept, of course, is going to be on the y-axis. It's 0, negative 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So remember, your x-intercept is on the x-axis, your y-intercept is on the y-axis. The last thing you've got to do is just take a straight edge, hold it up to the 2 points, and you're going to connect the 2 points. Excuse my wiggly line, I'm trying to do it straight. And there's my graph. So we found the x and y intercepts by replacing y was 0 and x was 0 respectively and solved for the other variable. We plotted those 2 x and y intercepts on our graph and connected them, and boom, we have a graph. The last thing we're going to do is to find the slope. So whenever you're finding slope, I kind of showed you, you already have your triangle, right? Your x and y intercepts, they make a triangle with your x and y axes. So you just have to count. The rise is the up and down distance, that's 4. The run is the side to side distance, that's 6. Because it's positive, it's moving up from left to right, we're going to make sure to keep it positive. And then we're going to put the rise of 4 over the run of 6. You always want to simplify your fraction. I know some students on the quiz were confused by what that means. That means put it in its simplest form or reduce it completely. You can type 4 over 6 into your calculator and it will simplify it for you if you're no good at that. But that simplifies to 2 over 3. So there is your slope. Very cool. All right, let's try it again. So by looking at this equation, you can see that it also is in standard form. Remember, in this form, it's not ready to graph like it is when it's in slope-intercept form. So remember, if you've got the x's and y's on the same side of your equation, you're in standard form. So the easy way to graph is to find both your x and y intercepts. So do what Miss D suggested. Split up your paper. We'll do x-intercept on one side. Remember, that's where y equals 0. And then we'll do y-intercept on the other side. Remember, that is where x equals 0. Okay, so for the x-intercept, that's where y is 0, so we're going to replace y with 0, or you can kind of think we're going to just get rid of that whole term. When we do that, we get 4x equals 20. I fixed my equation. To solve this equation, we're going to divide both sides by 4 to get x by itself. So x equals 5. There is your x-intercept. If you write that as an ordered pair, remember, as an ordered pair, the y value is 0. So you would just put the 5 where the x is. There's your x-intercept. For the y-intercept, remember, that's where x is 0. So you would put a 0 right here where x is. 4 times 0 makes that whole term disappear, right? So what you have now is 5y equals 20. You've got this cute little equation, easy to solve. To solve for y, you're going to divide both sides by 5. So y equals 4. There's your y-intercept. As an ordered pair, remember, the y-intercept is where x equals 0, so you would put the y value of 4 where the y value goes. So those are your two intercepts. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and graph. So on your paper, just go ahead and sketch an x and y axis. Don't worry about if it looks perfect. And we're going to go ahead and plot these points. So the x-intercept, of course, is on your x-axis. It has the coordinates 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops, right here. The y-intercept has coordinates 0, 4. Remember, that's on your y-axis, and that's right here. So the x and y-intercepts will always be on the x and y axes. Now we're going to connect it with a straight line. Of course, you want to use something straight to draw your line against. I have trouble doing that on my iPad. There is our graph. The last thing we want to do is to find the slope. The slope can very easily be found by looking at our graph because the x and y intercepts already make a triangle with the x and y axes. So we're going to count the rise, which is the vertical change. It's 4. We're going to count the run, which is the horizontal change. It's 5. And then we're going to write it as a fraction. Altogether, this graph goes down from left to right, so we need to make sure we've got a negative in our slope. The rise goes on top, that's 4. The run goes on bottom, that's 5. This fraction is completely simplified, so here is your slope of negative 4/5. All right, let me know what questions you have.